Hello, everyone. I'm going to do a read aloud for you today, and this one is called The Moon Book. Oh, so cool. I love the moon. I don't know if you do this at night, but if I ever see the moon at night, I have to go to a window and look at it and study it for a little bit and just really enjoy and appreciate it. I hope you do that too if you don't already. Moon. As the sun sets at the end of each day, the sky becomes darker and darker. On many clear nights, our moon shines brightly in the night sky. A star burns gases that give off heat and light. The sun is a star. I don't know if you knew that. A planet reflects sunlight and revolves around the sun. Earth is a planet. Our moon is the brightest and biggest light in our night sky. It outshines all the stars and planets, which appear as small points of light. Some planets have many moons. Earth has one. And the thing we have to remember about our moon is it's very close to us. I mean, it's still, thousands of miles away. I don't know exactly how many miles away it is, but other moons in our universe that might be larger don't appear that way because they're so far away from us. Our moon looks big and bright because it is so close to Earth. Did you look at that? I just said that. They're thinking the same thing that I am. And compared to the faraway stars and planets, it is about 238,900 miles away. And that gives you a little bit of an idea of the size of the Earth and the moon. I don't know that the moon is that large in relation to the Earth, but sometimes artists take liberties and they do it for illustration purposes. Sunlight. So the sunlight's coming this way. The moon is about 2,000 miles in diameter and about 6,800 miles around. Earth is about 8,000 miles in diameter and about 25,000 miles around. The moon makes no light of its own to shine. It is bright in the night sky because it reflects the sun's light. It is about 1/4 the size of Earth. Okay, so that's pretty accurate, I guess. It is made up of rock and dust. There is no air or sign of life. Astronomers study the planets, their moons, and the stars. So this might be what an astronomer is seeing through a telescope. That could be, another galaxy. That could be ours. An orbit is the path of one object around another. Most scientists and astronomers think our moon formed about 4.5 billion years ago. Some believe something collided with Earth that tossed out a cloud of rock and debris. While orbiting around Earth, the rock and debris came together to form the moon. And a lot of people think they came together by gravity. Gravity, which is what keeps our feet on the Earth, which pulls us down. It's a invisible field that pulls us down, is actually what pulled all those like floating debris around and formed the Earth. That's one theory. I don't think we know exactly. In ancient times, people thought the moon was a powerful god or goddess. The Romans called their moon goddess Diana. In Greece, the moon goddess was Selene. It was so cool. My daughter was born on not only a full moon, but a blue moon, which is the second full moon of the month. And that is my daughter's middle name, Selene. We named her that because of the day she was born. Who rode through the sky in a silver chariot. Some American Indian tribes believed the moon and sun were brother and sister gods. Stories and legends were told about the shapes and shadows that show on the moon's surface. Some people said the moon showed a man's face, and you've probably heard the man in the moon, who was imprisoned there for stealing. Others told of moon demons living there. So before we had science, we have science to explain things. A lot of cultures, a lot of people who lived, thousands and thousands of years ago didn't have science to understand what was happening in the world, like the real things. So they made up myths or legends about stuff because they had no other way to explain what it was. The moon is Earth's only natural satellite. It takes about 1 month for the moon to travel around the Earth. So here's the sunlight still coming from this direction. A satellite is an object orbiting around a larger one. So the moon is orbiting around the Earth, and the Earth is orbiting around the sun. Right? It gets a little confusing, but let's hang with it. So the moon makes one complete rotation for each complete trip around the Earth. Thus, the same side of the moon is always facing the Earth. So you've heard astronauts say when they've gone up to land on the moon, or sometimes they drop astronauts off on the moon and then they go around in their spaceship, their landing craft, to orbit back around and then come back and land and pick the men up. It's the dark side of the moon is what they call it, because it's really dark there because the sun is not reflecting off of that part. The moon appears to change shape, but it doesn't. The different shapes we see are called phases of the moon. We are seeing different amounts of light being reflected on the moon. How much light we see depends on the positions of the Earth, the moon, and the sun. And that's a little confusing, but we're not going over that in first grade, but you will go over the planets in second grade with Miss Mary. I'm a little disappointed I can't teach the planets, because I did when I used to teach third grade, and I absolutely love teaching kids about the planets. The phases of the moon. Okay, the new moon, the crescent moon, and the first quarter moon. Yeah, this gets a little technical. I'm going to skip that part. I hope it's okay. It's a little technical, but we know that the sunlight in relation to where the Earth is reflecting light off of the moon, and depending on the angle of the sun and the angle of the Earth and where the moon is, it can appear as though the moon goes through. This is called a gibbous moon. That's called a full moon. That's a gibbous moon. That's a last quarter moon. That's a crescent moon. That's a new moon. And then it resets every 30 days and goes through that same cycle again. A solar eclipse. The moon's orbit around Earth is usually tilted slightly compared to Earth's orbit around the sun. Because of this, the moon cannot exactly line up between the sun and Earth. But when the moon's orbit is not tilted, and the moon lines up exactly between the sun and Earth, a solar eclipse happens. That's really interesting. So here's a little project on how to make a solar eclipse. And I've done some stuff with that. I've done some experiments when I taught about the Earth about that. When the sun, this is a lunar eclipse, when the sun, Earth, and moon are exactly lined up, a lunar eclipse happens. As in a solar eclipse, the moon's orbit is not tilted. The Earth blocks off the sunlight that usually lights up the moon. The moon has a reddish glow. That's so cool. I don't know if you've ever seen those reddish moons, but I think they sometimes call them the harvest moon because of the time that they happen, which it was in the autumn. Sometimes they're called a blood moon because they're almost like a blood cover. I think a harvest moon might be like where the moon appears really large, and the blood moon is where it appears that orangish red color. For obvious reasons, that's the color of blood. Lunar comes from Luna. Ooh, that's the name of my cat, Luna. Yay! Can you tell our family likes moon? We have a cat and a daughter named after the moon. The Latin word for moon is luna. A lunar eclipse can last up to 3.5 hours. So a high tide happens about every 13 hours. The moon affects the oceans too. The moon's pull, called gravity, on the oceans is strong enough to cause tides. Tides are the daily rising and falling of the ocean's water. I'm sure you've seen that if you ever spent time at the beach. Sometimes the water is low, and then sometimes it's high and it comes back in. That's because of the gravity of the pull of the moon. So cool how the moon can affect that. This is because the moon takes about 25 hours to come back to the same place in the sky it was the night before. Tide differences vary around the world, and a low tide happens every 13 hours, and a high tide happens about every 13 hours. So some of the things we could look at the moon with, binoculars or a telescope. An observatory would be, like big money type of place with a huge telescope where they can observe. And these observatories, it's important they put them in places where there's not a lot of light, like not near a city. These would be like in the desert in Arizona or somewhere like that where they can get a clear night sky and there's not light. There's something called light pollution where the light from cities can affect our ability to see what's in the sky. Some night sky gazers and astronomers can get a close-up view of the moon by looking through binoculars. Others look through telescopes. Some huge telescopes are used at observatories. So a close-up view of the moon's surface shows dark patches astronomers call plains or seas. Other areas are covered with craters, mountains, and valleys. The moon's craters were formed between 3.5 and 4.5 billion years ago when meteors pounded its surface, or almost as long as Mr. Scott has been alive. So here we go, right here. See, there's a valley and a crater and some mountains. It's so cool that they have a lot of the features, the geographic features like we have on our Earth. Boy, this is a long book, is it not? For centuries, people have wanted to know more about the moon. In 1959, the Soviet spacecraft Luna 3 transmitted to Earth the first pictures of the far side or back of the moon. There aren't as many dark areas on that side as on the side we see from Earth. So, this is talking about how in 1961, President John F. Kennedy wanted to put people on the moon. And I believe, let's check my date, July 3rd, 1969 was the first time. Oh, July 20th, 1969. That was 17 days after my brother was born. Neil Armstrong and Edwin Buzz Aldrin of the Apollo 11 mission became the first men to walk on the moon. I said July 3rd, 1969 because that's my brother's birthday. There were 5 more Apollo landings on the moon. The last one, Apollo 17, was in 1972. They did experiments and gathered samples, and we learned more about, the moon by bringing back moon rocks and stuff. On a clear night when the moon is in the sky, gaze up at it. We are still learning more about our closest neighbor, the moon. I love the moon. I love it. I want you to love it as much as I love it, but I get you're not going to love things as much as I love them. But check it out. Next time you see the moon out there, give it a good look. Really study it and look at it. It's so beautiful. There's so many, you could really actually with your naked eye, with just your eyesight without binoculars or a telescope, you can see the darker patches on the moon if you really study it close. And there are more moon facts here and all kinds of stuff. This is a cool book. I will have this book available for us in our classroom. All right, I hope everybody enjoyed that read aloud. I know it was really long, but I enjoyed reading it, and I hope you enjoyed hearing it too. All right, take care. Bye.